कथामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं श्रवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जनाः. So we were discussing in our previous class the conversation dated 28th October 1882, and it began with chapter 7, where M begins with a verse from the Gita, Bhagavad Gita 11th chapter, 45th verse. Adrushta Purvam, it begins with that, and the meaning is, I rejoice that I have seen what was never seen before. That is, he's speaking of the Vishwarup Darshan. But my mind is shaken with fear as a result of that vision. So show me that form I once saw, O God, have mercy, O God of gods, the abode of the universe. Prasida Devesha Jagan Nivasa. Tadeva me darshaya deva rupam. So that was the verse. But after that, there is a question, there is a story which Sri Ramakrishna, not story, an incident of his life which he is referring to, where he says, why do you dwell so much on the glories and powers of God? There was an incident which happened that there was a theft of an ornament from the Radhakanta temple, and Mathur Babu went and said to the deity out of anguish, O Lord, you could not guard your own ornaments. Hearing that, Sri Ramakrishna was upset. He said, it may be very valuable for you, but what does it mean? Uh, for God, His infinite creation, His limitless splendors, He would not bother for a small piece of ornament which may be very valuable to you, but He owns the whole universe, Jagan Nivas. He's the uh, one who has created this and He owns this. So the one who is the owner of the whole universe, or who is the creator of this universe, for him a small ornament which is so valuable, this gross loss of a gross ornament will not bother him at all. So after that there is a song which Sri Ramakrishna sings, a song full of sweetness, where he says Doob Doob Doob, Roop Shagore Amar Mohan, and all those things that we discussed last time. After that we come to the page 115, where we will begin today, where Sri Ramakrishna now says, of course he doesn't, we did not discuss about that song. So Sri Ramakrishna seems to be saying that you should not talk so stupidly. What riches can you give to God? You have given a beautiful ornament, that is fine. That is why I say, Sri Ramakrishna says, that a man seeks a person in whom he finds joy. What use is it to find out from him where he lives, how many buildings and gardens he owns, how much wealth, how many relatives, how many male and female servants he has? You see, when I see Narendra, Sri Ramakrishna is now giving this example, that when I see Narendra, I forget everything. I never asked him, even by mistake, where he lives, what his father does, how many brothers he has, and so on. So, that kind of curiosity is typical of a worldly mind. They attach so much importance to the different labels associated with a person that they forget the core of the human personality. That is what Sri Ramakrishna seems to be saying. That when I see Narendra, I see the innermost divinity which is being manifest in him. I don't bother whether he is rich or poor. So he expects all of us also not to judge a person or not to value a person by the labels he has, the tags he attaches to himself. A rich person, a poor person, a wealthy person, or a intelligent person or a dull person. So all these things are characteristics which characterize the gross body, the subtle body, at the most some of the causal body of a person. but the reality is beyond all that. And that reality can be seen as you see objects inside a glass cupboard. Just as clearly we see things inside a glass cupboard, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, I could see the innermost personality of a person. So when he saw Narendra or when he saw any other devotee approaching him, Sri Ramakrishna would see the possibilities inherent in him. He did not care for the external covering or the external appearance of a person, because he knew he had that capacity to see through and judge the samskaras of a person through and through. And that enabled him to judge a person not by his present status or the labels which the worldly people give him. We judge a person by what he appears to us externally, but we don't see the inner possibilities. So also, Sri Ramakrishna is hinting here that when you approach God, you should approach him for what he really is, not for what he can do for you. That's the basic mistake we all make. We make the basic mistake of thinking, what can God do for me? If he can do something for me, or if he can give me a few jewelry or some ornaments or a few cars and all those things, then I love God. That is not what Sri Ramakrishna is hinting at. He says, when you meet a person, if you find joy in his company, that should be the greatest reward. You should not think beyond it, whether he is rich, whether he is poor. So always there is a tendency of human beings to find a person in whom he finds joy. If he is a genuine person, if he is seeking joy, he will seek it in the person, irrespective of his outer appearance or of his labels. So that is why Sri Ramakrishna is correcting Mathur and saying, you should not talk so stupidly and judge God by his capacity to protect his ornament. Suppose Radhakanta's jewels are stolen by somebody. They are gross things for him. In essence, Radhakanta or Divine Mother or all the deities that we worship, they are not to be valued for the ornaments. That is why when some people say the Tirupati God is the richest God and he has so many ornaments, he is the richest temple and all those things, we try to judge the divinity by the external gross things, which Sri Ramakrishna is discouraging. You go to the person. Don't ask about how much wealth. If you find joy in the company of a person, you don't need to know what property he owns, if you are not expecting anything. So in a very there is a nice joke about Srimad Swami Bhuteshanji. He was very humorous. So you all know he was once upon a time the head of our Rajkot center for a long time, pretty long time, from 45 to 67. So nearly 24 years. So when he was there, when he came to Rajkot, the center was not doing very well. There was a lot of debt and there was a lot of poverty. So with great difficulty, he was slowly trying to establish that center because Sri Ramakrishna was practically unknown in the early 40s, before independence. Though Sri Ramakrishna movement had started much before that in 1897, it was slowly by the efforts of Swamis like Bhuteshananji, later on Swami Atmasthananji was the head of who later on became presidents. They were the head of Rajkot Center. So slowly the center started gaining in prominence and now it is one of the very important centers of our order. But in the initial days, when the movement was practically new, people in now the social media and other things were not there. So people were not very well conversant with the Ramakrishna Vivekananda ideology. So it was difficult to establish that center. So Maharaj used to say he had fortunately some good friends, some of them who had read the life of Ramakrishna and who used to be sympathizers or who used to be devotees, so-called devotees. I mean, devotees or well-wishers, you can say, not devotees, but well-wishers of the center. So they found uh, in Swami Bhutesh Anandji a nice personality. Some of them were attracted by his scholarship also, though he was very humble. He never projected himself as a scholar. He was very simple, and they became very good friends. One old gentleman, and he used to visit the ashram. He used to discuss many things, and he perhaps did not notice the difficult circumstances, the poverty under which uh, uh, poverty or the um, difficult circumstances under which the center was subjected to. They were passing through very difficult circumstances financially. But Maharaj used to slowly collect some donations and somehow managed to run the center. So one day, many of the regular visitors or devotees, they told Swami, and this gentleman who used to visit often was a very, very rich person, and he lived not very far away from the ashram. So when Swami Bhuteshand used to go for long walks in the early in the morning, he used to often see him from his house, come out, and then both of them used to walk together and discuss spiritual topics. So for a long time, Maharaj was in touch with this person, and he also enjoyed Maharaj's company. That gave him joy. But none of them, just as Sri Ramakrishna says, when you meet a person and get joy in his company, you don't ask how much wealth he has. So Maharaj was never curious. He looked upon everybody with the same attitude, rich or poor, and all those things. So he was every day walking with him, and then they used to return back. And on the way back, he used to invite Maharaj for a cup of coffee sometimes. So the coffee would be ready, and Maharaj used to just give him company and then come back. So this happened quite often. He used to, that rich well-wisher used to walk with Maharaj. Then one day, some of the devotees, when they saw, he said, "You walk with that gentleman regularly. Why don't you just ask him? He can solve all our financial problems. He's so rich, and he's generous also, he's given." So Maharaj immediately replied. Of course, he did not want to ask him anything, and he had not even disclosed that he was facing financial hardship for the ashrama. He was just content to talk about Thakur because he wanted to know about Thakur. So perhaps Maharaj felt, but in a joking way, though you should read, there's a deep meaning in what he said. But then jokingly he just dismissed it. The other devotees naturally suggested to him, why don't you ask him? He can definitely financially support us, give us whatever we need for the ashram. So he jokingly said, no, no, you want me to lose my cup of coffee? I mean, he was joking, of course. Obviously, he was joking because uh, what he meant to say was that if I approach him for money, perhaps he may stop coming and talking about Thakur with me. Coffee was not the main thing. Maharaj definitely would not go to somebody's house just for a cup of coffee. That was his gesture, and he wanted to keep the relationship to that only. He did not want to utilize the joy and friendship of discussing about Thakur with somebody and connect it with donations or money and all those things. So that shows that how deeply the ideas of gospel have entered Srimad Swami Bhuteshanandji Maharaj and all the senior monks. We learn from them that the labels which come with a human being should not be the criteria with which we judge people. People will come to Thakur. They will come with various motives, various purposes. They get joy. Perhaps that gentleman got joy in listening about Thakur. And Swami Bhuteshanji Maharaj felt that we should limit it to that. We should not connect this with the wealth he has. He has. So Sri Ramakrishna says, I don't ask Narendra what his father does, how big is his house. I just see, and Sri Ramakrishna could see. He could dive deep into the personality and he could find the spiritual fountain that was there in Narendra. So he says people should not approach God with this attitude. Dive deep into the sweetness of God's love. What need is there for us to find out about God's infinite creation, His limitless splendors? This may be important for other people who are gross in their approach because they give so much value to the temporal things of the world. But those who are more intelligent, they go more into the subtle things about God. That is a still higher level. But when you go beyond the causal level, when you know the importance of transformation, the transformation of the samskaras in a person, how we can use the grace of God, prayer, japa, and all those things to transform our samskaras, our causal body, then we don't care for transformation of our gross and even subtle uh, existence, the subtle personality. Some people pray to God for riches, for gross things. Some people may be slightly uh, advanced and they may think that, oh, okay, there's no harm in asking God for intelligence, for academic excellence, and all those things. We think it is a grace of God. By the grace of God, there are many devotees, and everybody feels that by the grace of God, we have got sons and daughters who are excellent. They have academic excellence. Perhaps they do not value the riches or the money. But some people are gross. They said, by the grace of God, I own so much property, I own so much wealth. So that is a grosser way of estimating the grace of God. In fact, the Lutheran movement, the famous Martin Luther, when he found that Christianity gave so much importance on poverty, self-inflicted poverty, I mean the saints, they believed in self-denial because they were all great saints like Saint Francis of Assisi. He sold all the wealth he had. He belonged to a very rich family and started begging. So that trend began to spread, and some people like Martin Luther, who started the reformist movement, perhaps thought that if so much of importance is given to renunciation and poverty, which is the essence of uh, the. If you see all the great spiritual people, they didn't care for wealth, but a strange philosophy was created as which was in opposition to this uh, the life of renunciation which some of the earlier Christian monastics they led, like beginning with Saint Francis and even before that, because that was Christ's original message. But as opposed to that, the Lutheran movement, Martin Luther, and all the successive people who followed that movement, they believed that how can one judge? They gave a different turn to the movement, which perhaps was not desirable. They said, how can you judge if a person has the grace of God or grace of Christ? The best sign to know is that he becomes prosperous. He wanted to disconnect the idea of poverty with spirituality. So he said, if a person becomes rich, that shows that he has God's grace. So that led to the materialization of spirituality. People forgot the spiritual ideal, and then they thought, if we are poor, or if for some reason we are not wealthy, then people will think that God's grace is not upon us. So instead of trying to get the grace of God, they tried to acquire wealth, sometimes by evil means also. Somehow prosperity was connected to grace of God, and that led to the downfall of the pure Christianity which was there before. So people got a wrong idea, just as Mathur said, these ornaments you could not protect. He thought the Radha Kanta god who was there in that idol, the spirit inside should have protected his own ornaments. Because he could not protect it, what is the use of such a god? So Sri Ram Krishna corrects him. It may be valuable for you, but it is useless. It's like a clod of earth. So he corrects and he says, it is not necessary. What need is there for us to find about God's infinite creation, His limitless splendors? These things are not necessary. Sri Ram Krishna then again sings a song full of sweetness with a voice that surpasses the voices of celestial musicians. This is what M felt. So the song says, dive deep, O mind, into the ocean of beauty, and to the deepest depths descend. There you will find the gem of love. Go seek, O mind, the blessed Vrindavan within your heart, the abode of the Lord of love. Then in your heart the unceasing light of knowledge will ever shine. Who is it that steers your boat over solid ground? It is your Guru, says Kabir. Listen and meditate on his holy feet. Now this song is very significant because in these three verses, the whole essence of spirituality is explained. As we discussed in all our classes, I took two special sessions on some of the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. If you see, you can get those on Facebook. It is very important to understand why again and again all our scriptures unanimously ask us to meditate in the heart. Heart, not the physical heart, but the center, heart center, which is the seat of not only our emotions, but the seat of our higher, which is the abode of the Lord of love, the Vrindavan. Vrindavan is synonymous with love of God because the gopis there thought that love was above everything. They did not care for their worldly pursuits. They just ran after Krishna, who was hardly 12 years or less than 12 years at that time. So they forgot. They used to come to collect water and listening to the wonderful divine music, the divine call of the young boy Krishna. They used to all leave their homes, and for that they were criticized. They were scolded. Their in-laws, their mother-in-laws, and even their husbands scolded them. What are you doing? But their love towards Krishna was so deep, and they could hear that music within their heart. So, and perhaps as is described here, the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras also mention that meditate on the heart of a great saint, somebody who is very holy. So that is what we do. Why do we do it in the heart? Because there it is there that we try and discover that wonderful love. If you can't, you can also meditate in the head, but the heart is the right place for meditation for most of us because that is where you can never make any mistake. Perhaps you know there is an incident in the life of Holy Mother when Virajanandji Maharaj, who was very young, he used to meditate on the top of the head or maybe between the eyebrows. And he continued that meditation for a very, very long time. And then something strange happened. And then he could not solve that problem. So he had to go to Swami Brahmananda. Even Brahmananda said, I am powerless to help you. You go to Mother, who is your Guru. The moment the young Kali Krishna, as he was known at that time, Kali Krishna Maharaj, went to Holy Mother, Sri Sharda Devi, she immediately touched his chest near the heart, near the spiritual heart, and said, my dear boy, why do you meditate on the head, in the head? This is where you should meditate. Fortunately, he was a disciple of Holy Mother, so she immediately corrected his meditation. And after that, he found as if a big load was released from his head and he could meditate and all the problems he had were solved. So It is a matter of experience. The Upanishads also say Angushta Matra Purushaha. In the Kathopanishad, everybody says meditate in the heart, meditate in the heart. In this song also says, there is in your heart the unceasing light of knowledge, which will ever shine. What is that light of knowledge? It is not the physical light, as if, though we may use that symbol to imagine light, as Patanjali says, as Swami Vivekananda comments, meditate on a light, a flame inside your heart. But that is just an outer expression of the inner wisdom, the light of knowledge. The light of knowledge, that is that which gives clarity to your thoughts, to your actions, and to all the efforts which we make. We make so many mistakes, mistakes in choices, mistakes in deciding what is good for us, what is bad for us, because the light of knowledge is not, we see things in a very hazy manner, in a very hazy way. So in spiritual life, hazy perceptions, they may be okay. You may go through a fog. When you are driving, if there is a fog, you may find it difficult, but still you can steer through that fog, provided you have the light headlights, very powerful headlights, which can penetrate that. So our existence, our choices which we make in life, our decisions, all our actions, our thoughts, everything is a bit hazy, as Mathur Babu's thoughts were. He thought loss of an ornament was such a big thing. And without thinking, he started saying, "Oh Radhakanta, you could not even fie upon you, you could not even save your ornament." So this kind of hazy thinking is not suitable for a spiritual life. We make mistakes again and again. And these mistakes, it is very difficult to retrace and correct these mistakes. So the light of knowledge, the unceasing light of knowledge, which can illumine our actions, guide us on the proper path, can be found in the heart. That is why he says, go seek, O mind. He's telling his own mind. So the seat of the mind should be the heart. What does it mean? Is it just the physical heart? No, it is the center where all the nerves, if you see Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the sutras which we are discussing now in Raj Yoga, they all deal with different techniques of meditation, and all of them somehow point to the fact that heart is the center where the nerves seem to originate from, and the whole nervous system, as it were, the subtle system, seems to have its center in the heart. So the more quickly, or the more uh, we struggle to establish that center in the heart, the more easier our spiritual life will be. As it was evident from the example of Kali Krishna Maharaj. So long as he was meditating in the head, he was finding things very difficult to understand. Perhaps they were straining him too much. But the moment his heart was touched by Holy Mother and said, "My child, meditate here, you should not be meditating there." So that shows that there is a deep connection between the divine love and our spiritual heart. So when we meditate in the heart, as this poet says, Kubir, he says, dive deep, O mind, into the ocean of beauty, and to the depths descend. So if you are at the surface of the mind, the reactive mind, you won't enjoy that treasure. You have to calm down your mind, stop the reactive mind for some time. What does it mean to meditate in the heart? When can we perceive the heart center? When our outer noise is stopped, when the outer agitating mind, the waves of the agitating mind, just like the waves of the ocean, they do not allow us to see the gems that are the gem of love that is at the bottom of the sea. It is something like that. So the poet, in a very poetic way, says, my mind, don't be superficial, don't be just hovering in your reactive mind, just don't be happy with the reactive mind, the way it reacts with the world, thinking that you are very intelligent, like Mathur Babu thought that he was very intelligent. He was trying to give advice to Radhakanta that fie upon you, you could not even stop the stealing of your ornament. So that is the level at which we react. We are upset because God does not give us our toys, as if God's duty is to give us toys. We complain that why is God so cruel to us? Why has He taken this? Why has He not given us this? Why is He giving things to undeserving people? So you will find that lot of commotion goes on in our superficial mind at the surface. Just as in the ocean there are a lot of waves, you can't see the depths. To go down, to go down into the depth of our mind, you have to dive deep, as Kabir says, and you will have to find the gem of love which is there. But that can happen only only if, as Patanjali says, you calm down the mind, chitta vritti nirodha. So the reactive mind prevents us from finding out the spiritual heart. And if you go deep, that is why the poet here says, go seek, go deep. The blessed Vrindavan is within your heart. It's not the external Vrindavan that is important. Have we found the Vrindavan within our heart? If we have found the Vrindavan within our heart, the knowledge, the light of knowledge that will shine, that will steer our boat over solid ground. Now this is very important. Who is it that steers your boat over solid ground? Now what does it mean? Solid ground, it is impossible to steer a boat when we are on solid ground. In water it is very easy to steer a boat. If it touches ground or it touches the sand, then the boat will not move. It is in the water only that it is very easy to steer the boat. So if we steer the boat, if we want to steer the boat over solid ground, we need the grace of Guru. It is your Guru, says Kabir. Listen and meditate on his holy feet. Meditating on his holy feet means meditating on the mantra that has been given to you and meditating on the Ishta and the center of the heart and trying to see the light of knowledge that will ever shine in our heart. When that happens, we see things from a different perspective altogether. We don't see things as Mathur Babu saw that and don't give importance, nor do we criticize God for not having given us this or that, because that is not the function of the Lord. The function of the Lord is to shine in the center of our heart. The unceasing light of knowledge is His greatest gift to us, so that we can perceive things correctly, make the right choices in life, so that we can live a life of peace, fulfillment, and joy. But unfortunately, we are seeking that joy on the surface. And the reactive mind, the more reactive it is, the more wavy it is, the more wavy the ocean, till it becomes calm. We can't see the bottom. And if the ocean is always full of waves, if our mind is always reactive, then there is very little chance for us to discover the gems of love which are at the bottom of the sea. That is why Kabir says, dive deep. What does dive deep mean here? Go into solitude, Nirjanvas, as Sri Ramakrishna said. Go into solitude, let the mind calm down. It has become restless for a very long time. Allow it to calm down. Why should we always create waves in our mind? Chitta Vritti, it's such an important sutra in yoga. Without understanding yoga, Raj Yoga, we can't understand the importance of meditation or even the importance of this bhakti, and all those things may sound very easy, but they are not possible without control of mind. Without that one pointed focus on stability, on something which is stable in the heart, the Lord of love who resides in the heart, the Krishna of Vrindavan. So Vrindavan is our body, and the earth is our body, and Vrindavan is like the heart in the body, because there is the gem of love there. Just as when the when the mind dives deep, when you go deeper and deeper, you will find that you will touch the bottom and then you will get those gems. But it will not happen if you remain at the surface. So, who is that steers your body over solid ground? It is your Guru, says Kabir. Listen and meditate on his holy feet. So there the song ends. So then Sri Ramakrishna is giving a beautiful example, trying to convince that how spiritual people, what attitude they have towards the world, towards the events that impact their lives in the world. Sri Ramakrishna says, even so, after the vision of God, the devotees wants to witness his Leela. Now, before that, uh, he says, just after this song, he says, he is giving the example of the mother of Ravana. So, after the vision of God, the devotee wants to witness his Leela. With what attitude does a person who loves God, is he simply satisfied with the vision of God? No, he wants to see his divine Leela. That is known as Leela Chintan. When we read the Sri Ramakrishna Leela Prasang, the Gospel, what actually we do is meditate on his divine Leela, because the capacity of the mind, being restless, cannot focus on one image or light within the heart as the Guru has advised you, and focus on the mantra for a comparatively long time. But as an alternative, the scriptures say that you can think or take a journey and meditate on the Leela of the Lord. If you cannot meditate on the Lord himself, the essence of the Lord. So, this here Sri Ramakrishna is saying, after slaying Ravana, Ramchandra entered Lanka. So there was a big war, all of us know. And Nikasha, the Ravana's old mother, tried to run away. So apparently, only Rama knew why she is running away. Lakshmana said, Brother Rama, see how strange this is. Nikasha is such an old woman. She has suffered so much at the loss of her sons, yet she is terrified of losing her own life and is running away. So Lakshmana had a very superficial mind as compared to Rama. So he thought Nikasha is running away. She has lost almost everything. All her sons, her grandsons, everybody. Ravana's sons died, and almost the whole of Lanka, the army, Ravana's army was killed. So, but definitely Rama would not, including Vibhishan and all the other women of the palace, Ravana gave them utmost respect and asked Vibhishana to rule it. So, Lakshmana perhaps thought that this lady has lost her everything and still she is clinging to, this old woman is clinging to her life. That is what we gross people estimate and judge people. Ramchandra then gave assurance of safety to Nikasha. He said, I am not going to kill you. You may be Ravana's mother, but I assure you that you will be safe. And called her to him and asked her about it. Why are you running? I am not going to do any harm to you. Rama knew why this particular woman is running away. He knew the intentions of Nikasha, but he wanted to explain it to Lakshmana in Nikasha's own words. So she said, Ramchandra first gave the assurance of safety. He said, you don't have to run away. I'm not going to harm you. And asked her about, why are you running away? And then she replied in front of Lakshmana, Rama, I have been able to watch all this Leela of yours because I am alive. And I want to live longer so that I may see more of it. So, of course, it looks rather humorous, that killing of our own sons and all those things. But the point here is that we live, the purpose of our life is served if we dwell on the life, on the Leela of the Lord. And that yearning, that hunger to see more and more, to enjoy more and more of the Leela of the Lord, to know about Him, to know about His exploits, that is known as Leela Chintan. So, Sri Ramakrishna is explaining to us that if you can't meditate, at least meditate on the Leela. That is why he said, even after uh, she lost everything, her devotion to Rama was so much that she wanted to see the more and more exploits which Rama did. Everything about the Lord becomes wonderful. Then he tells Shivnath, I like to see you. What shall I live for if I don't see pure souled ones? That is a typical attitude for all these saints, for all the holy people. Why did Sri Ramakrishna live? He had all the spiritual experiences. As Swamiji wanted to leave this world when he had Nirvikalpa Samadhi, he said, Sri Ramakrishna told him, I've just given you the taste of the mango, but I will not give everything to you. You you have had this taste of the mango, this spiritual experience, but you have some work to do. Only after that I will allow you to merge in your real nature. He was always anxious, always wanting to go back to that peaceful state from which he came. But why do the avatars perform all this Leela? Because, as Sri Ramakrishna said, when he finished his sadhana, when he had all the realizations possible, he went on the top of the kuti where he stayed, and then he was crying. Crying for whom? Crying for the devotees to come. He said, I have so much of spiritual wealth, I want to distribute it before I die. It is just like a miser having lot of wealth, in a very gross way, of course. He has lot of wealth. So he calls his near and dear ones and then distributes, writes wills and all those things. Because he feels that all these things should not go waste into the wrong hands. So also, Sri Ramakrishna and all used to go to that on the top of the kuti and every day in anguish cry, Kere kothaya achish, when where are all of you? Please come. So, and he used to say, he used to yearn. Naren could not understand in the beginning, why is he so restless? Even Swami Premananda and all others, Niranjanananda, were attracted by this wonderful love. He said, who is this person? He is suffering because I cannot realize God. Why is he so anxious? So, Sri Ramakrishna says, I like to see you. What shall I live for? Their life is meant for, of all these prophets, of all the great people, and all the gurus is for the disciples. They get joy in the company of these pure souled ones. The reason I feel that pure souled ones are my friends from a previous incarnation. Now this is a very significant statement. The Brahmo devotee who here says, do you believe in rebirth? Because many of them did not believe. So Sri Ramakrishna is now giving an explanation. What attracts certain people to certain holy people and why that attraction is there. Why pure souled ones, the great saints, would like to be in the company of pure souled ones, the pure souled disciples. They don't like worldly company. But they like company because the reason why he says, Sri Ramakrishna says, because I feel that they were with me in a previous incarnation. So they are known as Leela Sahachara. So all the inner circle and even some of the others, Sri Ramakrishna could see very clearly that they were his companions in his previous birth. And every time he comes to spread that divine love, they also come to spread it through to all the humanity. And some of them who were not eternal companions, but they said, by the grace of Sri Ramakrishna, I have become an Ishwar Koti. Like Swami Shivananda Mahapurush Maharaj said, they were sadhakas. They acquired the realization by the grace of Sri Ramakrishna. And then he says in his own words that by his grace, he made me an Ishwar Koti. He brought me to his inner circle. So Sri Ramakrishna used to see all the disciples and see them, judge them, and find out what they were in the previous birth. Because he could see the cause and effect as we see objects inside a glass cupboard. When a person came, he would not see any of his gross achievements, gross labels. He would not see any of his subtle achievements, his intelligence and all those things. They were important, but not so important to Sri Ramakrishna. He would judge a person, even people like Latu Maharaj, who had no learning, no wealth, who were poor, but he could see that this person has inherited something from a previous birth, that karma, that light of spirituality he has brought with him in this birth. So the Brahmo devotees ask him, do you believe in rebirth? That these companions whom you say, these pure souled ones, for whom you are hankering, like Naren and all those people. So he says, what else that gives me great joy? Just as if you like to meet your friend and it gives you joy, not because your friend can give you money or something like that. There may be other people who value the money the friend has more than the friend himself. But for many of them, they don't even discuss their personal problems. They find joy in the company of others. Similarly, the high souled ones, they get joy in the company of their disciples who are pure souled, who, who practice purity in an attempt to realize that spirituality. So the Sri Ramakrishna found happy if he found some people like Latu Maharaj, like Naren, and people misunderstood that as attachment. So when somebody said, why are you so much attached to Narendra? He first thought, yes, it is true. Why am I so much attached? So he goes to Holy Mother, then goes to the Divine Mother, and she says, you love them because you see Narayana in them. So that is the reason. So this prayer was to tell humanity that the people who come with incarnations, the Ishwar Kotis or incarnations themselves, they always love to be surrounded by pure souled ones like Swami Premananda. Sri Ramakrishna could not bear the touch of anybody and everybody. So he always kept some companions like Premananda, whose company he enjoyed and who used to hold him if he went into samadhi. Otherwise, he would feel tremendous pain. The gross worldliness of other people he could not bear. So Sri Ramakrishna says now the next topic is rebirth. That is the heading which M has given. O Arjuna, you and I have passed through many births. Now this is the Bahuni me vyatitani janmani tavacha Arjuna. Bhagavad Gita verse 4th chapter, the 5th verse says, Bahuni me vyatitani, I have passed through many births. Janmani, Bahuni me vyatitani janmani, tava cha Arjuna. And you also, both of us have undergone several births as the Guru and the disciple. That is why you are my disciple in this birth also. So Sri Ramakrishna says, yes, they say there is a rebirth. How can we of tiny intellect understand the actions of God? Many people have said so, so I don't disbelieve them. Now Sri Ramakrishna is explaining in a logical way the concept of rebirth because it is mentioned everywhere. The Gita also says. So I don't believe, and then he gives a beautiful example from the Mahabharata, where Bhishma Deva is lying on the bed of arrows, and all the Pandavas were standing near Krishna. They saw tears flowing from Bhishma Deva's eyes. Arjuna said to Sri Krishna, brother, how strange it is. Pitamaha, who is Bhishma Deva himself, who has truly conquered all the senses, a Jnani who has conquered all desires, including that of death, a Jnani, and he is one of the 8 Vasus. 8 Vasus means the companions of Vasudeva. So the 8 gods, 8 Vasus are the 8 gods actually. So they are the deities through which the creator Vasudeva runs this universe. So he is one of them, and still he is crying like an ordinary person. Even he weeps at the time of his death because of Maya. Then Sri Krishna, just as in the previous case, Rama asked Nikasha herself why she was running away, just to convince Lakshmana and remove his ignorance. Here also Sri Krishna is asking, why don't you ask Bhishma himself? And asks Bhishma in front of Arjuna to clarify his doubt. He says, when Sri Krishna asked, why are you crying? He knew why he is crying. And Bhishma replied, Sri Krishna, you know very well I am not weeping because of death, because of incumbent death. Otherwise, I would not have laid myself on the bed of arrows in such pain. I am not afraid of death at all. But when I see that there is no end to suffering, he said, I am surprised at one thing, that how Maya works. So even in that condition, he is thinking of the glory of God or the ways of the world. So Sri Ramakrishna here seems to be pointing out that we can't understand, nor should we try to understand. So many people are so keen to find out why we are suffering, why such and such a person is not suffering. Then there are so many questions. If you ask people who come to spirituality, mostly want solution to their problems, thinking that they are the only people who are suffering in the world, or they are the only people, others are the only people who are happy in the world. They don't know all these things are bound by a law of karma. But it is a very difficult thing to understand this law of karma. As Sri Ramakrishna says, Gahana karmano gati. So the gati, even Sri Krishna says, it is very difficult to understand the ways of karma, the effects of karma, the cause and effect theory, which gives rise to this karma. So he says, uh, Bhishma says, when he's lying on the bed, he's telling Krishna, I'm not crying because I am going to die. I have conquered death. But I see, I don't understand these Pandavas who have killed him, in fact. He has fought a war against Pandavas. If he knew, if he wanted happiness, if he wanted to save himself, he would not have fought this war. He had conquered death, he had realized. But at the same time, he says, I don't understand your Maya. These Pandavas who have the Lord himself as their charioteer, you are guiding them, you are protecting them, you're doing everything for them. I weep thinking that I have not been able to understand any ways of the God. So his only regret is that I have conquered death, but I still don't understand the ways, the Maya of the Lord, which makes impossible look possible and possible look impossible. So the Pandavas who had Sri Krishna as their own companion, what greater fortune there will be if the Lord himself is your charioteer, who runs your chariot and is your companion, and yet there is no end to our suffering. So is it reasonable for all other people devotees, to think that because we pray to God, because we do spiritual practices, we will never come across suffering? No, God has never promised that. That is why in the Gita, the message very clearly says, Anityam asukham lokam imam prapya bhajasvamam. So the Lord is very clear. Somebody asked Srimad Swami Vireshwaranji Maharaj, who himself was suffering from cancer, and at that time somebody came and went on asking, why am I suffering? Why am I suffering? Why am I suffering? Why God is so like, I do this, I do that, I do this puja, I do that. I'm such a great devotee and still these things are happening. Then Maharaj got a little impatient. He said, do you think Krishna has misguided all of us? Do you think Krishna has misguided all of us? If the world was heaven, the world was a happy place, and if God helped you to live in a heaven because you prayed to Him, you will be given all the luxuries and everything to enjoy the gross things of the world and the subtle enjoyments that you are aspiring for, the heaven which you are dreaming about. If everything would have been given by God, do you think He is such a fool that he will misguide you by saying Anityam Asukham Lokam? Why don't you believe, say, Krishna? Just now you said you are a devotee of Krishna, you go to the Krishna temple in Udupi every day, you are so devoted to Krishna, you have built a Gita Bhavan, for you have spent so much money, you are so devoted, you go on bragging you are no Krishna. Then why don't you listen to what he is saying? He is clearly shouting and telling in the midst of the battlefield. And as Bhishma says, he is not even able to protect the Pandavas. And Kunti says, I know that. Kunti knows that he is the companion, he is looking after all the Pandavas, but he could not prevent the Pandavas' children from being killed. So what is the purpose of worshipping such a god. So Sri Krishna tells as the final answer, and Vireshwaranji said, you see, God has not misguided us. He is telling us the truth when he says, Anityam asukham lokam imam prapya bhajasvamam. So what is the best thing for you to do? And I end with that because that is what Sri Ramakrishna mm, uh, is saying here, hinting that. Bhishma is crying not because he is suffering. He is understood that these are the ways and he has realized God. But at the same time, he doesn't realize what strange Maya is this. God creates the Asukam, the world itself is a miserable place to live in, and He creates that and helps people to come out of that. So, and He gives the solution, but we don't take the solution. He says, Anityam Asukham Lokam. This whole world is Anitya because it is transient, because nothing is going to remain permanently. It is Asukham. It's not Asukham because you don't have this or you don't have that. Even if you have this or that or many things, because it is Anitya, it is Asukham. Anityam Asukham Lokam. Then what do you do? If it is Anitya, if it is Asukha, should I give up everything? He said, no. Bhajasva Mam. Imam Prapya, having got this, know it for certain that if you worship me, then you can come out of this mess which you have created. So we will end today, and if there are some questions, you can ask. So we just completed. We are